The email that changed everything, the sky over Palo Alto, was pale and quiet. The kind of calm that felt staged, like it knew something big was about to happen. Sundar Pichai sat in his home office, hunched slightly forward, deep in thought, as his eyes moved across two monitors. Numbers, charts, and lines of code meant to optimize the next generation of artificial intelligence danced before him, but he wasn't really seeing them. His mind was elsewhere. Something had shifted in him recently, a kind of restlessness he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't about work. It wasn't about money. It wasn't even about responsibility. It was something older, deeper, almost forgotten dot on the desk beside him. His phone buzzed gently. A calendar reminder blinked across the screen. Meet with AI ethics team, 11 a.m. He dismissed it without hesitation. He leaned back in his chair, letting the silence stretch, and for a moment, he simply stared at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above. The hum was hypnotic. His mind wandered, drifting back to something he had pushed away for decades. Or rather, someone just then, a soft ping echoed from his inbox. A new email. He reached for the mouse almost out of habit and clicked into it. At first, the name didn't register. It was just another unread message in a sea of urgent, red-flagged demands. But then he blinked. The name repeated in his brain, slowly decoding a memory he hadn't accessed in 30 years. From eera.sharma@gmail.com. The world around him faded. The air in the room shifted. Sundar felt like someone had punched the breath out of his lungs. His high school girlfriend, the girl with the soft eyes, the loud laugh, and the dreams that reached beyond the skies of Chennai. They had walked together under mango trees after class, shared street food near the temple, whispered secrets beside the school library shelves. They had made promises with naive hearts to study together abroad, to change the world, to never lose each other. But life had other plans. He opened the email, unsure whether he was ready for what he might read. Hello, Sundar. I hope this reaches the right Sundar Pichai. If it doesn't, then this will just be a strange letter in someone's inbox. But if it is you, I guess I finally found the courage to write. I saw you on TV a few weeks ago. The interview about AI ethics. Your voice hadn't changed. Not really. It was strange watching you talk to millions and remembering the boy who used to write poems in the back of his notebook and blush when I caught him. 30 years. I don't know why it's taken me this long. Maybe because I always thought reaching out would only make things harder. Maybe I thought you wouldn't remember me. But lately I've been thinking about time, how it moves. How it doesn't wait. There's something I want to say. Something important. If you're open to it, I'd love to talk. With respect and old memories, Mir Sundar sat frozen. His hand trembled slightly on the mouse. For a long time, he didn't move, didn't breathe. Outside the window, the sunlight filtered through the trees, casting golden lines across the floor. But all he could feel was the weight of the past crashing into his chest. Just her name cracked something inside him that he had long sealed shut. It wasn't just nostalgia. It was regret. It was wondering about the road not taken. It was remembering her standing in the train station, waving goodbye as he left for America, both of them pretending they weren't crying. He hadn't seen her since that day. They had kept in touch for a while, awkward letters at first, then emails that came less frequently, then silence. Life pulled them in different directions. He had thrown himself into work, into ambition, into creating a future where people would remember his name. And she had disappeared into the fog of memory. Why now? Why after all this time? His fingers hovered over the keyboard. He could respond, or he could pretend he never saw the email. After all, people from the past sometimes carried emotions that didn't fit in the present, but Sundar wasn't the kind of man to run. He clicked reply. Dear Mira, I don't know where to begin. I didn't expect to hear from you. Not after so long. And yet, seeing your name brought back more memories than I can explain in an email. I do remember you. Of course, I do. If you're comfortable talking, I'd like that more than you know. Tell me where to begin. Sundar hit send. And as the message left his outbox, he felt something shift in his chest. Like a window had cracked open in a room that had been locked for decades. The next morning, Rira replied, "Thank you for writing back. I wasn't sure you would. There's so much I want to share, but I don't want to write it all in an email. Would you be willing to meet? I live in San Jose now. Not far from you, I think. I'll understand if it's too much. But if you say yes, I'll send the address. Take care." Mirahi stared at the message for a long time. So many questions swirled in his mind. Why had she moved to California? Had she always been here? Was she married now? Did she have children? What had life done to her? He closed the laptop slowly, as if he were holding something fragile in his hands. He walked out onto the balcony and looked out over the hills. Everything seemed suddenly unfamiliar, like the world had tilted slightly. He whispered to himself, 30 years. And then, without overthinking it, he opened the email again. "Yes, let's meet. Within 10 minutes. She replied with an address. A small cafe in downtown San Jose, Sunday, 3 p.m. The rest of the week passed in a haze. Sundar went through meetings, presentations, interviews, but his mind was always somewhere else. His staff noticed a change in him. He was quieter, more distracted. He smiled to himself more often. But no one dared ask. Sunday came faster than he expected. He stood in front of his closet, staring at rows of pressed shirts, unsure what to wear. He chuckled to himself. Why am I acting like a teenager? He chose a simple blue shirt and jeans, understated, soft, something that wouldn't speak louder than he intended. The drive to San Jose was quiet. The roads were calm. His hands gripped the wheel tightly. As he pulled into the parking lot of the cafe, his heart pounded in a way it hadn't in years. He felt young and terrified all at once. He walked in slowly, scanning the tables, and then he saw her. She was sitting near the window, her hair longer than he remembered, streaked, with silver tied loosely in a braid. She wore a simple maroon shawl over a cream-colored blouse. She was staring into a cup of tea, her fingers nervously drumming against the side. When she looked up and saw him, she smiled, that not the kind of smile you give a stranger, the kind of smile that knew every part of you once. He walked toward her slowly, as if afraid she might disappear if he blinked. "Mira!" Her eyes softened. Sundar. They didn't hug. They didn't shake hands. They just sat down across from each other and stared for a moment, unsure where to begin. "You look just like I remember," she said gently. He laughed, nervous. "I think I've aged a little." She tilted her head. "Not in the places that matter." A silence stretched between them. Comfortable. Familiar. Then she said, "I didn't come just to say hello." He nodded. "I figured." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small, worn notebook. Its corners were frayed, the pages slightly yellowed. She placed it on the table, sliding it toward him. "You gave this to me the day you left." Sundar's eyes widened. He picked it up with trembling hands. It was the notebook he had filled with handwritten poems, the ones he never dared share with anyone else. "Except her. I've kept it all these years," she whispered. "Every page, every word." His voice cracked as he asked, "Why?" And then her voice softened into something heavy and sad. "Because you never said goodbye properly." The words hit him like a wave, and before he could respond, she reached into her bag again and pulled out a photo. It was of a young girl. With his eyes and Mira's smile, Sundar's mouth opened, but no sound came. Mira placed the photo between them gently, and "Her name is Tara." Then she whispered, "She's your daughter?" Asterisk, the name he never knew. The walls of a cafe seemed to close in. Not physically, but emotionally, as if the space between him and Mira had suddenly become a tunnel of time. Memories, in truth. Sundar stared at the photograph like it was a mirror to a world he never knew existed. His heart pounded, each beat growing louder than the one before, and his breath came in shallow, shaky gasps. It was a simple image. A girl, no older than 20, smiling brightly under a jacaranda tree, her eyes reflecting a depth far beyond her years. And those eyes, they weren't just familiar. They read his .me said nothing. She let him sit. With the weight of her words, the silent storm dancing across his face. His lips parted slightly, but no sound emerged. He was used to solving complex equations, negotiating billion-dollar deals, addressing audiences of thousands without flinching. But in this moment, faced with a truth that rewrote his past, Sundar felt like a boy again. His hand trembled as he gently picked up the photo. How old is she? He finally managed, his voice rough like sandpaper. She just turned 21, Mira said softly. Last month. Asterisk, his fingers tightened on the edge of the picture. 21. That meant Mira had gotten pregnant around the time he left for the US. His mind began calculating backward, linking timelines, searching for gaps, trying to remember the last time he saw her. They had promised to write to stay connected, but the letters had grown less frequent. He had blamed life, busyness, ambition. He had no idea there was another reason. A reason that had been growing quietly in the world without him. Asterisk. Why didn't you tell me? The question spilled from him before he could control it. It wasn't angry, but it was aching. Lowered her eyes. Because I was scared. He looked at her, waiting. You had just left, she continued, her voice soft and fragile. You had dreams, Sundar. Real ones. You were going to change the world. And I didn't want to be the reason you gave it all up. But you should have told me, he whispered, more to himself than to her. I had a right to know. I know, she said, barely audible. I know. And there hasn't been a single year when I didn't think about that. Sundar's mind was spinning. Every success he'd ever had, every late-night coding, every boardroom meeting, every step forward in life, it now stood beside this one, gaping truth. He had a daughter, a living, breathing human being walking the earth with his blood, his name perhaps, and yet he had missed everything. Her first steps, her first words, her first day of school. He hadn't been there to wipe her tears or to hold her during storms. He had missed every birthday, every scraped knee, every moment a father should have stood beside his child. He felt hollow. Does she know about me? He asked, still gripping the photo.me. Hesitated, then nodded. Slowly. I told her when she turned 18, and she didn't take it well at first. She was angry. She asked why I waited so long, why I didn't let you be part of her life. And now? He asked, his throat dry. Now, she wants to meet you. The words hit like lightning. Sundar leaned back in his chair, stunned. It was too much to process. Joy, fear, guilt, confusion, all crashing into him like waves in a storm. He had dreamed of building a legacy through his work, through technology, through the companies he helped grow. But he had unknowingly left behind the most personal. Legacy of all. A daughter. He stared at Mira. She was calm, but her eyes shimmered with restrained emotion. She had carried this secret for 2 decades, raising their child without ever once asking for anything. She had built a life in silence. He could only imagine what strength that must have taken. Why didn't you come to me when you moved here? He asked. Because I didn't know you were here, she replied. I moved to California 5 years ago after my parents passed away. I was teaching art at a community college. I didn't even know you lived nearby until I saw that interview. He shook his head, as if trying to undo time. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, she said gently. Not now. They sat in silence for several minutes, both staring at the photo lying between them. Then Sundar spoke again. What's she like? Mira smiled, a proud but wistful smile. She's brilliant, curious, stubborn. She asks too many questions. She loves building things. Give her a broken clock, and she'll turn it into art. Or a robot. He smiled despite himself. She plays the violin. She's studying environmental science at Stanford. His eyebrows lifted. Stanford? Yes, Mira said. On scholarship. She's determined to make the world better. She sounds amazing. She is. Sundar's throat tightened. And she's mine. She's ours, Mira corrected. With warmth, he looked away, blinking back the wetness in his eyes. Can I meet her? He asked, after a long pause. Yes, Mira replied, but not today. She doesn't know we've met. I wanted to speak to you first. He nodded slowly. I understand. The conversation drifted into quieter waters after that. They spoke of old memories, the school where they met, the teachers they feared, the little bookstore where they used to hide and read for hours. Laughter returned, tentative at first, then stronger. A thread stitching past and present as the sun dipped below the skyline. Painting the windows in gold, they stood to leave. Outside the cafe, the breeze had grown cooler, brushing against their faces like a soft reminder that time kept moving, no matter what truths it revealed. Thank you for meeting me, Mira said, holding his gaze. Thank you for not giving up on me, he replied. They stood there for a moment longer, as if unsure how to part ways again after all that had been shared. I'll be in touch soon. She promised. He nodded, then turned toward his car. But before he opened the door, Mira called after him, Sundar. He looked back. There's one more thing, she said, walking toward him. It's about Tara. His heartbeat quickened. What is it? Mira looked down, hesitant. Then her eyes met his with a quiet pain that hadn't been there before. She's been sick, she said, for a while now. The words dropped like stones in his chest. What do you mean, sick? Mira exhaled, and her voice dropped to a whisper. She was diagnosed with a rare autoimmune condition last year. It's manageable, but the treatment is expensive. She's strong. She tries to hide it, but there are days when she can barely get out of bed. Sundar's entire body went numb. Why didn't you tell me this first? Because I didn't want you to think that's why I reached out. He stepped closer, his eyes fierce with emotion. Mira, you should have told me the moment she got sick. I would have, I know, she interrupted gently. I know you would have helped, but I needed to be sure. I needed to know you still cared. His voice broke. She's my daughter. Of course I care. Mira's eyes shimmered again. Then meet her. Talk to her. Not as a stranger. Not as a billionaire CEO, but as her father. Sundar nodded slowly, his heart raw. Tell her. I'll do whatever it takes. Mira gave a small, grateful smile and stepped back into the fading sunlight. And as Sundar drove home that evening, the city lights flickering around him, he wasn't thinking about meetings or deadlines or company stock. He was thinking about a girl named Tara, a daughter he never knew, and a second chance he never expected. But even as hope began to stir in his chest, he couldn't shake the haunting worry that had just taken root. What if it was already too late? Asterisk, her voice on the phone night after Sundar returned from the caf. He didn't sleep. He couldn't. His body lay still in bed, but his mind traveled endlessly through the corridors of memory and imagination. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her, Tara, a stranger who was his own flesh and blood. He imagined her laugh, her voice, her fears, her childhood birthdays he never attended. He imagined her struggling through pain, hiding illness from the world, and all he could think was, where was I? By dawn, the first light seeped through the window, painting the walls with a pale gold that looked almost apologetic. Sundar sat by the window, clutching the old notebook Mira had given him, the one filled with teenage poems. His words were there, written decades ago in messy handwriting, echoing the boy he once was, and the girl who had believed in him long before the world ever knew his name. For the first time in years, the CEO didn't feel powerful. He felt small, human, like a father standing at the edge of something sacred he didn't yet understand. At noon, his phone rang. It was Ami. He picked up quickly, his voice soft. Hello? She's ready to speak with you, Mira said without preamble. Her voice was gentle, cautious, like she didn't want to startle the moment. Sundar's heart jumped. He straightened in his chair. On the phone? Yes. She said she wants to hear your voice first. He nodded as if Mira could see him. Okay, I'm ready. There was a short silence. Then the line shifted slightly. A new voice came through. Hello? It was soft, melodic, unsure, and yet confident beneath the surface. Like a violin played by someone trying not to tremble. Sundar swallowed hard. Tara? A beat of silence. Then. Yes. He exhaled. The word wrapped around his soul. It's... Sundar. He said, I know. More silence. But it wasn't cold. It was loaded with 1,000 unsaid things, like a dam holding back a flood. I'm so glad to finally hear your voice, he said gently. I've been thinking about you nonstop. Her breath caught on the other end. He could tell she was nervous, maybe even angry or scared. He understood. He deserved that. I never thought this would actually happen, she finally said. You talking to me? He closed his eyes. I wish it had happened sooner. One wish I had known. I wish you had too. Her voice wasn't bitter. It was simply honest. Raw. You must have a lot of questions, he said, unsure how to begin. I do. But not the kind you can answer in one call. Then I'll be here for every call after this. As many as you need. A pause. Then a small exhale. Why didn't you ever try to find me? She asked. His heart ached. Because I didn't know you existed. Mom didn't tell you? No, not until last week. The moment she did, I asked to meet you. Another pause. I've read about you, Tara said, her voice steadier now. I've watched your speeches. You always sound so in control. He smiled sadly. I've spent most of my life being in control. This is the first time in a long time that I don't feel that way. Why? Because I missed your life, Tara. Every second of it. And I don't know how to make up for that. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked, what were you like when you were my age? He laughed gently, surprised. Lost? Hopeful. Scared. Determined. I had dreams so big they didn't fit in the rooms I lived in. I was hungry to prove myself. And somewhere along the way I forgot to look back. Were you in love with Mom? He paused, surprised again. Yes, very much. Do you still love her? This time he hesitated longer. I respect her more than I can explain. She gave me the greatest gift without even asking anything in return. And she raised you alone. That kind of strength. That kind of love. I always carry it. He could hear her breathing on the other end. I don't know what to say. She finally whispered. You don't have to say anything, Tara. Just know, I want to know you. Not because I feel guilty. Not out of obligation. But because you're a part of me that I never got to meet. And I don't want to miss one more day. Another silence. Then. In the softest voice, she asked, will you come to my concert? Sundar blinked. Concert? I play violin, she said. Stanford Student Ensemble. We're performing this Saturday. It's kind of a big deal. He smiled, warmth spreading in his chest. I wouldn't miss it for the world. Okay, she said quietly. I'll leave a ticket for you at the front. Thank you, he whispered. I'll be the one in the front row. Second chair. Red dress. I'll find you. And then the call ended, leaving Sundar sitting in the silence of his home, holding the phone like it had just delivered the most important words he'd ever heard. That week, he could barely concentrate on anything. He attended meetings with half a mind, signed documents he barely read, smiled for cameras that felt more distant than ever. His team noticed his absence, even when he was physically there. Something had changed in him, a softness, a vulnerability, something far more human than the polished image the world had grown used to. Friday evening, he called Mira again. Thank you, he said the moment she answered. For what? For raising her. For being stronger than I ever was. For letting me back in. Mira's voice was filled with a quiet strength. You're here now. That's what matters. On Saturday, Sundar arrived at the Stanford Concert Hall in a simple gray coat. No entourage, no security. Just a father stepping into a new chapter of his life. The hall was already buzzing with families, students, and professors, all finding their seats, flipping through programs. He slipped in quietly, sitting in the middle row, heart pounding with every second. The lights dimmed, and the music began. He saw her before he heard her. a young woman with thick black hair, tied into a simple bun. Her back was straight, her eyes focused, her hands poised on the violin like it was an extension of her body. And when she played, Sundar felt something inside him crack open that it was more than music. It was memory. It was the ache of years lost and the hope of moments yet to come. Her bow moved with precision, but her soul poured out in every note. He could see Mira's grace in her movements and his own intensity in her eyes. When the concert ended, the audience erupted in applause. Sundar stood frozen, clapping slowly, eyes wet. He didn't care who saw. He had just met his daughter, not through words, but through music, outside the hall. He waited near the fountain. She approached slowly, violin case in hand, red dress, catching the moonlight. "You came," she said. "You were incredible," he replied. Voice trembling, they stood facing each other, father and daughter, strangers connected by blood, time, and music. "I don't know how to do this," she said. "Honestly, neither do I," he replied. "But we can start now." She looked down, then back at him. "Okay." And for the first time, she stepped forward and hugged him. His arms wrapped around her with all the emotion he'd been holding back. He held her like she might disappear. Again, like she was a miracle he never thought he'd touch. As they pulled apart, she whispered, "I want to know everything." "And I want to give you everything," he promised. But just as the moment settled, she looked up at him with a sudden seriousness. "There's something else," she said. His stomach tightened. "What is it?" "I didn't tell you the whole truth on the phone," she said, looking away. "About what?" Her eyes filled with something deeper, not just sadness, fear. "My condition. It's not manageable anymore." Sundar felt air leave his lungs. "What do you mean?" "My doctors say I might need a transplant soon, and the waiting list is long." "Too long?" He stared at her, heart pounding, the joy of the reunion now tangled with dread. "What kind of transplant?" he asked, his voice barely audible. She looked at him. "Bone marrow." And then she added, with eyes full of hope and quiet desperation, "And there's a chance. You might be a match." The test of blood and time at night air was thick with emotion, as Sundar stood frozen beside the fountain, his daughters, the last words echoing endlessly in his mind. The joy he had felt just moments ago was now layered with fear, uncertainty, and a sudden sense of urgency that made every second feel heavy. He looked at Tara, her brave face trying to stay calm, but behind her steady eyes was something unmistakable, a quiet pleading, the kind only a child could give a parent when words failed. His throat tightened. "Do they know what stage you're in?" he asked, each syllable trembling under the weight of disbelief. Tara nodded, her hands gripping the strap of her violin case a little tighter. "They said it's advancing faster than they thought. I've tried every medication. Some worked for a while. Most didn't. My immune system's burning itself out. And the doctors said the transplant is my best shot," she finished for him. "If I don't get one soon, things will get worse. Much worse." A silence hung between them like a curtain too heavy to pull aside. Sundar looked at her, this beautiful, brilliant, courageous girl, his girl, and realized how much. He had already come to love her, not because of biology, not because of guilt, but because of who she was. A young woman fighting through pain without bitterness, who had every right to be angry at him. Instead, gave him a second chance. "Why didn't you tell me this earlier?" he asked softly, stepping closer. "Because I didn't want that to be the reason you stayed," she admitted, her voice small. "I needed to know you came because you wanted to, not because you felt obligated to save me." "Tara," he said, his voice breaking, "there is no part of this where I feel obligated. I want to be here. I want to help. I want to know you. And if there's anything I can do, anything, I will." For the first time, she smiled again, a little lighter this time. "Then let's start with a test." The next morning, Sundar arrived at Stanford Medical Center under a name no one recognized, a quiet patient among others, without security, without media, without status. He sat beside Tara in the waiting area, filling out forms, answering questions, letting nurses draw blood, check vitals, and document family history. The doctors were polite but focused, their tone clinical, their urgency subdued behind professionalism. Tara sat next to him the entire time, sometimes stealing glances, sometimes asking him little questions about his childhood, his studies, or what kind of food he liked. It was strange, this rhythm they were creating, small talk with the undertone of life and death. Yet it felt real, honest, human. When the blood test was done, the doctor nodded at Sundar. We'll run your HeLa typing immediately. We should know in a few days. How likely is it that I'm a match? Sundar asked, anxiety curling in his stomach. Since you're her biological father, there's about a 50% chance you'll be at least a partial match. If you're a full match, the odds of a successful transplant increase significantly. And if I'm not, the doctor's face softened. Then we explore other options. Tara reached over and took his hand. It was the first time she initiated touch, and Sundar felt something electric in that small gesture. He looked at her, squeezing her hand gently. I want to believe this will work, she said, her voice quiet but strong. It will. He replied, it has to. Over the next few days, their bond grew quickly, not rushed, but intense, like water flowing into cracks that had been dry for too long. Sundar visited her at her dorm, brought her meals, listened to her speak passionately about climate change and renewable energy. He watched her design a small vertical garden in her room, using recycled bottles and soil sensors she had programmed herself. He saw how her friends respected her, how her professors admired her, how she carried herself with grace even on days when her body was clearly failing her, and yet she never complained. Not once. One evening, as they sat in the university courtyard watching the stars, she leaned back and asked, do you believe in destiny? He thought for a moment. I believe in choices. And I believe that some choices bring us back to where we're meant to be. So, you think this, she gestured between them, was meant to happen? He smiled. I think I was meant to find you. No matter how long it took, you're kind, she said, gentler than I expected. Is that a good thing? Yeah, she said, staring up at the sky. It is. Just then, his phone buzzed. It was an email from the hospital. Subject. He lay typing results. Confidential. His hand shook as he opened it. His eyes scanned the document quickly, heart racing, breath caught in his throat. Tara looked at him, sensing the shift in his energy. What is it? He looked up at her, eyes shining with relief and emotion. I'm a match, he said. For a second, she didn't respond. Then she let out a sound, half laugh, half sob, and launched herself into his arms. They held each other under the stars, not as strangers or regrets or lost years, but as father and daughter, joined now. Not just by blood, but by fate. This is our second chance. He whispered into her hair. No, she replied, pulling back slightly. This is our first chance. A week later, the hospital scheduled the transplant procedure. Tara would undergo conditioning, chemotherapy, and radiation to prepare her body, while Sundar would be admitted for the bone marrow extraction. The process wasn't without risks, but the medical team was optimistic. Tara was young, resilient, and now she had hope, the kind that doesn't come from medicine, but from love. On the day of the procedure, Sundar lay in the hospital bed, 4 lines in his arms, machines beeping steadily around him. Mira stood at his side, her eyes misty but proud. I don't think I ever thanked you, Sundar said to her. For what? For raising her to be who she is, for not giving up, for being stronger than both of us. She smiled softly. You would have done the same if you'd known. He looked at her for a long time. Would you have ever told me if she hadn't gotten sick? Mira looked down. I don't know, I wanted to. But maybe we're waiting for the universe to decide. A nurse entered the room. We're ready, Mr. Pichai. He nodded, heart steady. See you on the other side, Mira said. Touching his hand as they wheeled him into the operating room, Sundar felt a strange peace settle in his chest. It wasn't fear, it wasn't even pain, it was clarity. All his life, he had chased greatness through invention, leadership, innovation. But here, in this sterile, fluorescent lit room, he understood what truly mattered. Not the code, not the titles, but connection, truth. Legacy. Hours later, he awoke in recovery, groggy but alert. Nurses moved around him quietly. Mira entered the room with tears on her face. "How is she?" He asked immediately. "The transplant was successful," she said. "She's resting. They said your marrow began engrafting sooner than expected." His body ached, but his heart soared. "Can I see her?" "Not yet," Mira said gently. "But soon." "They want to monitor her closely the first 24 hours. He nodded, sinking back into the pillow. Outside the window, the city glowed softly in the early evening light. And for the first time in a long time, Sundar closed his eyes and slept, not out of exhaustion, but out of gratitude. But somewhere down the hospital corridor, inside a different room, Tara lay still in her bed, eyes closed, surrounded by monitors, and as a nurse checked her vitals, a small red light blinked quietly on the machine. A number had dropped. Her blood pressure. The nurse frowned and called another in, and as they moved quickly around her, unaware that Sundar still slept peacefully nearby, the soft rhythm of the machines took on a slightly different tone. Something was happening. Something no one had expected. Asterisk, a heart in crisis when Sundar awoke. The hospital room was dark except for the quiet hum of machines and the faint golden hue of the early morning sky filtering through the window. His body felt heavy, the ache in his lower back pulsing gently from the marrow extraction. But his mind was clear, one singular thought driving through him like sunlight breaking over a long night. Tara. He turned toward the door, hoping to see a nurse or someone from the medical team with news. But the room was empty. A vase of fresh flowers sat on the side table, their soft petals already beginning to wilt, a quiet symbol of time slipping forward. He reached for the call button, pressed it once, and waited. A minute passed. Then two. Finally, a nurse entered. A new face, unfamiliar, young, and polite. "Good morning, Mr. Pichai," she said with a gentle tone. "How are you feeling?" "Tired," he said. "But okay. Is Tara awake?" The nurse paused just a fraction of a second, just long enough for Sundar to notice. Her smile stayed, but her eyes gave something away. "The doctors are still monitoring her closely," she said. "Someone will come update you shortly." His chest tightened. "Has something happened?" "I'm not authorized to say, sir. But Dr. Solano will be here soon." As she left, Sundar sat upright in the bed, every nerve in his body suddenly on high alert. It wasn't just the physical pain anymore. It was the growing unease in his chest. Something was wrong. He felt it in his bones, in the way people avoided eye contact, in the stiffness of the nurse's smile, in the hollow rhythm of silence that followed her out the door. Meera arrived 10 minutes later. Her face was pale, her lips tight, and her eyes were swollen as if she hadn't slept all night. "What is it?" Sundar asked immediately. She sat beside him, her hands clenched together in her lap. After the transplant, her body began responding. Well, her vitals were steady. Everything looked promising. Then what happened? Early this morning, she had a reaction. Her immune system became unstable. Her blood pressure dropped rapidly. They're saying it could be a form of graft versus host disease. Sundar's breath caught in his throat. "I thought they prepared for that." "They did," she said. "But sometimes, even with preparation, the body responds in ways no one can predict." Just then, the door opened and Dr. Solano stepped inside. His face was calm, but his tone carried a seriousness that filled the room like a cold wind. "Mr. Pichai," he began, "I want to first thank you. Your donation was successful, and the marrow is beginning to engraft, which is a very good sign. Tara's body is showing some early immune response, which was expected. However, there's been a complication." "What kind?" Sundar asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "She's developed acute respiratory distress. likely triggered by inflammation. We've intubated her and moved her to the ICU. We're doing everything we can, but the next 48 hours will be critical. Sundar's hands tightened on the bedsheets. He looked at Mira, who was fighting to hold back tears. Can I see her? Not just yet, the doctor said. She's sedated. But we'll let you in as soon as possible. The room fell silent. Later that afternoon, Sundar was finally wheeled into the ICU. The machines in Tara's room blinked and beeped, tracking every heartbeat, every breath forced into her lungs by a ventilator. Tubes ran from her arms. A monitor hovered near her chest, and her eyes, usually so full of light and defiance, were closed, her face peaceful but pale. Sundar sat beside her, unable to speak for several minutes. The sound of the ventilator filled the room in soft waves. He reached out and gently held her hand, which was cool to the touch. I'm here, he whispered, his voice cracking. I'm right here, Tara. He thought of all the things he hadn't yet told her, about how he had kept a small photo of Mira hidden in a box for years, how he used to wonder what his life would have been like if he had stayed in India, how he sometimes dreamed of a daughter without knowing her name. He leaned closer, resting his forehead gently against her hand. Don't leave me, he said. Not now. Not when we just started. Behind him, Mira stood in the doorway, watching the man she had once loved break down beside the daughter they had created together. Her own pain was quiet, older, the pain of watching your child suffer without being able to trade places with them. That night, Sundar didn't leave the hospital. He stayed by Tara's side, reading aloud from her notebooks, sharing memories she had missed and whispering promises into her ears. Not knowing if she could hear him, "You're not just my daughter," he said softly at one point. "You're my redemption, my greatest reason to live. If you wake up, I'll give you every part of my life. I'll walk away from everything if that's what you need. No more missed years, no more silence. Just us." The nurses gave him space. The doctors checked in every few hours. But mostly he sat in silence, praying not to any specific god, but to love itself, to time, to fate, to whatever force might be listening. And somewhere in the middle of the night, as the room rested under the dim glow of machines, something changed. A monitor beeped slightly higher. A subtle spike in heart rate. A tiny shift in the pressure regulator. Sundar noticed it immediately. He leaned forward, staring at her. Her eyelids twitched. Once. Twice. Then. They opened. Slowly. Heavily. And her eyes met his. "Papa?" His chest caved with relief. He nodded, tears falling freely now. "Yes, Tara. I'm here." She tried to smile, but the breathing tube held her still. Her fingers squeezed his hand. Gently. The first sign of strength returning. Within minutes, nurses rushed in, and the room came alive. They called for Dr. Solano. They began adjusting the machines, speaking in rapid but excited tones. By sunrise, the ventilator was removed. Tara was weak, unable to speak more than a few words, but she was conscious. Stable. Alive. And as Sundar sat beside her bed, holding her hand like it was the most sacred thing he had ever touched. He whispered again, "Thank you." "Thank you?" But later that day, as she rested and he stepped outside for air, his assistant called. A news report had just broken. A former board member from one of his companies had leaked a private medical record, a photo of Sundar at the hospital, with a caption, "Google's CEO prioritizes secret family over shareholders. Questions arise over breach of fiduciary duty." Within minutes, it was everywhere. Social media, headlines, investor boards. Scandal. And as Sundar stood in the hospital courtyard, staring at the chaos unfolding on his phone, the weight of the world came crashing back. The world was watching, and not all of them were rooting for him. The decision that changed everything. Phone in Sundar's hand buzzed relentlessly. Screen flooded with texts, headlines, email alerts, and flashing calls from lawyers, board members, journalists, and advisors, all demanding a response, a statement, a reaction. Yet he just stood there, frozen on the hospital steps, the morning, light wrapping around him like a spotlight, exposing everything he had fought for. and everything he now stood to lose. The photo, his photo, sitting in that hospital chair beside his daughter. Head down, exhausted but present, had gone viral within an hour. The image wasn't meant for the world. It was intimate, raw, and deeply personal. And now, it was being dissected by strangers, spun by media outlets as a scandal, and politicized by those who never cared to ask what love looks like after 30 years of silence. Asterisk. Words like irresponsible, secret family, corporate neglect, and scandalous affair headline financial blogs and tabloid papers alike. But none of them told the truth. None of them knew the girl lying in that hospital bed, or the mother who had held a lifetime of sacrifice and silence. None of them knew the pain he was carrying, the joy he had just begun to feel, or the impossible choice now looming over his future. A hand touched his arm. He turned. Me. Stood beside him, face calm but eyes searching. I saw the news, she said softly. They're tearing me apart, he murmured. Of course they are, she replied gently. That's what they do when something real threatens, something polished. He nodded, heart pounding. The board called a meeting. He said, they want an explanation. What are you going to say? That I chose to be a father, he whispered. That for the first time, I showed up where I was needed. She took a step closer, placing a hand on his chest. They won't like that, I know. A long silence passed between them. Then she added, but your daughter will never forget. Later that afternoon, Sundar sat alone in a private conference room at Google's global headquarters. Screens lit up as executives from around the world joined the emergency board meeting via video. Faces filled with concern, confusion, some with frustration, and a few with barely disguised disdain. We're facing a storm, the chairman said. Investors are nervous. The press is swarming. Some are questioning your judgment, Sundar, the secrecy, the optics, your sudden absence during a major product launch. Sundar listened quietly. Another board member added, we understand this is personal, but the company's image is global. This affects all of us. Another voice chimed in, harsher this time. Do you know how many billions were wiped off the market cap in the last 24 hours? Sundar finally leaned forward, his fingers interlocked, elbows on the table. I do, he said calmly. I've seen the numbers. I've read the articles, and I've heard every argument being made. The room fell still. He continued, but let me ask you something. What exactly are you upset about? Is it that I sat next to my daughter in a hospital while she fought for her life? Is it that I didn't prioritize a quarterly meeting over a bone marrow transplant? Or is it that the world saw me being human and not just a CEO? His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. I've given my entire adult life to building this company, he went on. I've missed birthdays, funerals, anniversaries. I've worked through sickness. I've slept in server rooms. I've sacrificed years for this mission. And I'll continue to serve, but not at the expense of the one thing I can never get back. He paused, letting the words settle. I met my daughter 3 weeks ago, he said. For the first time, she's 21. I didn't know she existed. And now, she's fighting for her life because of a condition neither she nor I chose. I donated my marrow to save her. I would give more if I could. And if being present for her recovery cost me the position you gave me, then so be it. The room was silent. I will not apologize, he said firmly. And I will not let this company, or any company, dictate the limits of love, fatherhood, or humanity. He stood. You can make your decision, but so will I. And then he walked out. Outside, the California sun was sharp and clear, unapologetic in its warmth. Sundar climbed into his car and drove back to the hospital without looking back once. When he entered Tara's room, she was sitting up for the first time, sipping water from a straw, her eyes tired but glowing. You look like you just walked. Away from something big, she said, smiling faintly. I did, he replied. Was it worth it? He took her hand gently, kissed her knuckles. You are. 2 days later, the board released a joint statement. Not to fire him, not to reprimand. But to support him, the public had spoken louder than the critics. The photo that had once sparked scandal had now sparked empathy, conversation, and even admiration. Families shared their own stories of sacrifice. Young professionals praised him for showing that. Leadership isn't just performance, it's presence. He returned to work not as a man silenced by pressure, but as someone newly respected for his choice to be both a leader and a father. He changed policy in his own company, expanding medical leave for family emergencies, increasing mental health support, and starting a fund to help employees care for ill loved ones. But more than that, he came home every night to Tara, who slowly grew stronger, her health improving day by day. They built something new together. Sundar taught her to code while she taught him how to grow herbs on the balcony. They went on long walks where they spoke about philosophy, pain, the past. He introduced her to old friends, and she introduced him to her world, young, hopeful. Honest. On her next birthday, he stood beside her at a small party. Just family, just laughter, just love. And in the middle of it all, Tara pulled out her violin. She stood quietly in front of a small crowd, eyes glistening with gratitude. She didn't make a speech. She didn't need to. She just raised her bow and began to play. The song was soft at first, gentle, uncertain, like a story searching for its beginning. But then it grew, richer, bolder, alive. And in every note, Sundar heard something deeper than music. He heard healing. He heard forgiveness. He heard love, real, quiet, earned. And as he stood there, a father reborn, a man forgiven by time, a heart mended by a second chance. He closed his eyes, smiled, and whispered to himself, This is what truly matters.